Zanele, a kind and hard-working woman from Mbale, Uganda, had been happily engaged to Thabo for 2 years. She loved him deeply and believed their love story would end with a beautiful wedding. For years, she dreamed of the day she would walk down the aisle in her white dress, surrounded by family and friends, smiling at the man she thought was her soulmate. When Thabo finally said the wedding was happening, Zanele was full of joy. But soon, things started to feel strange. No one told her anything about the preparations. There were no dress fittings, no invitation cards, and no meetings to discuss the big day. Every time she asked, Thabo's family would just smile and say, "Just wait, surprises are coming." At first, she thought maybe they were planning something special for her, maybe a grand surprise wedding. But the days passed, and still she knew nothing. Her excitement slowly turned into worry. Why was everyone treating her like a guest instead of the bride? She started to feel left out and confused. She tried to talk to Thabo, but he had changed. He became quiet, distant, and always busy. When she asked him what was happening, he simply said, "Trust the process." That sentence kept ringing in her ears, but it didn't calm her heart. One day, while visiting her aunt's house, she heard her cousin whispering about a big wedding happening at Entebbe Hall, a wedding that was supposed to be hers. That moment, Zanele's heart dropped. Something was wrong, very wrong. She didn't know exactly what was going on, but deep inside, she felt a storm was coming, and this dream wedding she had waited for might actually be her worst nightmare. As the wedding day came closer, Zanele expected to be busier than ever. She thought she would be trying on dresses, choosing flowers, talking with family, and finalizing the guest list. But instead, her world went quiet. Her phone, which used to ring every day with excited calls from friends and family, was now silent. No one was asking her anything about the wedding. No one was checking on her. It felt like everyone had suddenly forgotten she was the bride. At first, she tried to stay calm. Maybe it was just part of a surprise, she told herself. Maybe they were planning something big behind her back, something beautiful. But the silence started to hurt. She felt alone. Even her fiancé, Thabo, began acting differently. He no longer called or visited her like before. When they did speak, he was cold and short with his words. It felt like he was keeping something from her. One evening, Zanele decided to ask him directly. She held his hand and looked him in the eyes. "Thabo, what is going on? Why am I not part of the wedding plans?" He didn't say much. He just smiled weakly and said, "Trust the process." Those words, meant to comfort her, only made her more afraid. What process? Why was she, the bride, the only one being kept in the dark? Zanele's mind started racing. She stayed up at night, wondering what was really happening. She remembered how her future mother-in-law would always say, "Just wait, surprises are coming." But what kind of surprise leaves the bride out completely? Something didn't feel right. Then one afternoon, everything changed. Zanele was at her aunt's house, helping with some cooking, when she overheard a conversation that made her heart freeze. Her cousin, Ketumetse, was on the phone in the next room, laughing softly and saying, "Yes, the big wedding at Entebbe Hall will be perfect. Everything is ready. I can't wait to walk down the aisle." Zanele stood still. Her heart pounded in her chest. Entebbe Hall? That was supposed to be her wedding venue. She hadn't told anyone about it except Thabo and a few close family members. And why was her cousin talking like she was the bride? Was this the wedding Zanele had been waiting for? A wedding that was happening without her? She didn't say anything right away. She walked home slowly that day, her mind full of questions. Could Thabo be marrying someone else? Could it be her own cousin? The thought felt too painful, too wild to be true, but something inside her knew the truth was close. That night, Zanele sat alone in her room, looking through her engagement photos, remembering all the promises Thabo had made to her. How could he do this to her? She had given him everything, her heart, her time, her future. And now, he was hiding something big, something that felt like betrayal. Instead of crying, Zanele started thinking clearly. If there was something going on, she needed to find out. She began checking her phone, going through old messages, looking for clues. She remembered when Thabo had once asked for a copy of her ID for the wedding paperwork. At the time, it seemed normal, but now it felt like a piece of a bigger puzzle. Why had she not seen any documents since then? Why had she not signed anything? Zanele's worry turned into suspicion. She decided to visit the local registry office, pretending to ask about the wedding date. What she found shocked her. There was a wedding scheduled at Entebbe Hall, and it was under her name, but she had never signed anything, never agreed to the date. Her ID had been used without her knowledge. Someone had stolen her identity. It was more than just heartbreak now. It was fraud. She walked out of the office with shaking hands but a strong heart. She went straight to the police. Quietly and bravely, she told them everything. She didn't have all the answers yet, but she had enough. Someone was planning a wedding using her name, and she was not going to stay silent. The officer she spoke to listened carefully. They agreed to watch the situation closely and promised to act if her story checked out. Zanele walked home with tears in her eyes, but this time they were not just tears of sadness. They were tears of strength. She was not going to let anyone play with her life. She decided she would go to that wedding. She would see with her own eyes what was happening. And if the truth was as ugly as she feared, she would not let it happen quietly. Something big was coming. The bride may have been left out, but she was not defeated. She was ready to fight for herself and the truth. The morning of the wedding arrived, but for Zanele it felt like a funeral. She didn't wear a white dress or makeup. Instead, she wore black, a simple black dress with no jewelry and no smile. Her heart was broken, but her mind was clear. She knew what she had to do. She had already spoken to the police and told them her story. Now, she needed to see the truth with her own eyes. Quietly, without telling anyone, she left her house and made her way to Entebbe Hall. Every step she took was heavy, but she kept walking. Her hands were cold, her heart racing, but she didn't stop. When she arrived, she stayed outside the gate, hiding behind a tree. She didn't want anyone to see her yet. From a distance, she could hear music playing. There were flowers everywhere, white and gold decorations, laughter, expensive cars, and well-dressed guests walking into the hall with excitement. Everything looked like a perfect wedding, but it wasn't hers. Zanele stood there frozen. It hurt so much, but she needed to see more. Carefully, she moved closer, trying to get a better view, and then she saw it, a moment she would never forget for the rest of her life. Thabo, the man she had loved for 2 years, was standing at the front of the hall. He was dressed in a smart white suit, smiling, but he wasn't waiting for Zanele. He was waiting for someone else. The music changed, people clapped, and then, walking down the aisle in a beautiful white gown, was her cousin, Ketumetse. Zanele gasped. Her knees almost gave out. She had feared it, but seeing it with her own eyes felt like a knife through her chest. Her own blood, her cousin, was marrying her fiancé. She stood there quietly, heartbroken, but calm. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply reached into her bag and took out her phone. She made one phone call. It was short and simple. "They're here. It's happening. You can come now." She hung up. The police were already nearby, waiting for her signal. She had prepared everything in silence. She didn't want to ruin the wedding with drama. She wanted to end the lies with truth. A few minutes later, just as the couple was about to say their vows, police cars pulled up outside. Guests looked around in confusion. The music stopped. Then the officers walked in. The whole room went quiet. The groom, the bride, the guests, everyone froze. And then the voice of the officer echoed through the hall. "We are here on reports of identity theft, fraud, and forgery." Cameras started flashing. People took out their phones. The fairy tale wedding was now a public scandal. Zanele slowly stepped into the hall. Still in black, she stood at the back. Some people turned and stared in shock. A few recognized her. Ketumetse's smile disappeared. Thabo looked like he had seen a ghost. He tried to speak, but the police stopped him. "You're under arrest," they said. One officer held out the wedding certificate. "This document was registered using this woman's name and ID," he said, pointing at Zanele. Gasps filled the room. The guests couldn't believe what they were hearing. Ketumetse's face turned pale. She tried to argue, but the police showed proof. Zanele had already given them everything: her stolen ID copies, her messages with Thabo, and the documents from the registry. It was all real. The wedding was a lie. Thabo, Ketumetse, and even Zanele's aunt, who helped with the fake documents, were all taken away. People recorded the moment on their phones. Videos of the fake bride in her wedding gown being led away by police quickly spread on social media. Within hours, it was all over Uganda and South Africa. The headlines were brutal. "Bride arrested. Real bride sends her to jail. Wedding scam exposed at the altar. Cousin betrays blood for gold. Zanele didn't say a word during the whole scene. She just watched. She didn't need revenge. She only needed truth. And that day, she got it. The pain was still there, but so was the strength. She had been fooled, betrayed, and used, but she had not stayed silent. She had stood up for herself with courage and dignity. As she walked away from the venue, still dressed in black, some people looked at her with pity, but others looked at her with respect. They saw not just a woman who was hurt, but a woman who refused to be broken. She didn't crash the wedding, she exposed it, and that quiet strength made her story go viral. Zanele didn't just lose a fiancé that day. She lost fake family, fake love, and fake promises. But in return, she found her voice. A voice that would later inspire thousands of women who saw her video, read her story, and said, "If Zanele can stand up, so can I." Zanele stood quietly at the back of the wedding hall, dressed in black, her heart beating fast, but her face calm. Her whole world had turned upside down, but she stayed strong. She had already cried enough. She had already felt the pain. Now, she was focused. She had made the decision days ago that no matter how hard it was, she would not let this go. When she first suspected something was wrong, she started asking questions. Why was she left out? Why did Thabo act so strange? Why did her cousin, Ketumetse, talk about a big wedding like it was hers? Then came the shock at the registry office, where she found out that someone had used her name and ID documents to register a wedding. And it wasn't her who signed anything. She knew this was more than betrayal. It was a crime. She stayed quiet, didn't tell anyone what she knew, and went straight to the police. She explained everything. She even gave them copies of the stolen documents. The officers were serious and told her they would be ready on the day of the wedding, waiting for her signal. And now, that day had come. Zanele watched from a distance as Thabo and Ketumetse smiled in front of the guests. They looked so proud, so happy, as if they had won. But Zanele knew the truth, and very soon, so would everyone else. She took out her phone and made one short call. "They're here. It's time," she said softly, then hung up. She looked at the stage one last time. Her cousin stood in a white dress, holding flowers. Thabo was by her side. The officiant opened his book and began the ceremony. Guests clapped and smiled, unaware that everything around them was built on lies. Suddenly, loud voices came from outside. People turned their heads. Car doors slammed. Uniformed officers walked in through the entrance. Some guests stood up, confused. The music stopped. The mood changed immediately. A lead officer stepped forward and raised his hand. "We are here to investigate a case of identity theft, fraud, and forgery," he announced. Gasps echoed through the hall. Phones came out of pockets. Guests began the filming, whispering to each other, asking what was going on. The bride and groom looked frozen. Thabo's smile disappeared. Ketumetse held onto his arm, her face pale. Then came the moment no one saw coming. Zanele stepped forward. Slowly, she walked down the aisle. She didn't speak, didn't shout. She just walked, her head high, her eyes straight ahead. Some people recognized her right away. "That's Zanele," someone whispered. "Wasn't she the real bride?" someone else asked. Ketumetse turned to look, her hands shaking. Thabo looked like he had seen a ghost. The police turned to Zanele. "Is this the woman who used your name and documents?" the officer asked. Zanele nodded. "Yes, that's my ID. That's my name. But this wedding is not mine." The officer showed the wedding certificate to the crowd. "This marriage was registered under Zanele's name. She never gave consent. She never signed this. It is fake." The guests were stunned. Cameras flashed. Some people gasped loudly. Others stood in silence, too shocked to move. Ketumetse tried to explain, her voice shaky. "It's a mistake. I didn't know." But the officer cut her off. "We have the evidence. You are under arrest." Thabo tried to walk away, but two officers stopped him. "You are also under arrest for identity theft and fraud." Zanele's aunt, who had helped plan the wedding, stood in the front row. She looked around nervously. "And you," the officer said to her, "we have your name on the documents. You're coming with us too." The hall was no longer a place of celebration. It had become a crime scene. The bride in her beautiful gown, the groom in his shiny suit, both were being taken away in handcuffs. Guests watched in shock as the fairy tale wedding turned into a real-life drama. Some people cried, Others recorded the scene for social media. Within minutes, videos started going viral. The story spread like wildfire. Fake wedding exposed in Uganda. Bride arrested at altar. Cousin tries to steal wedding. Gets caught. Zanele stood there, watching it all. She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She had no joy in seeing her cousin arrested, but she felt peace. She had done what was right. She had fought back with truth, not hate. She had stayed calm while everyone around her tried to silence her. Now, the truth was out. Everyone knew what really happened, and no one could ever take her voice away again. She turned and walked out of the hall as the police cars drove off. People moved aside to let her pass. Some looked at her with tears in their eyes. Others nodded with respect. She wasn't just the woman who stopped a wedding. She was the woman who stood up when no one believed her. She was the woman who turned her heartbreak into power, too. The wedding hall, once filled with music and smiles, was now silent. The only sounds were whispers and gasps from the shocked guests. People didn't know where to look. At the police, at the bride in handcuffs, or at Zanele, the real bride who had just exposed it all. The ceremony stopped completely. There was no cake, no dancing, no "I do." Everything had fallen apart in front of everyone. The police moved quickly, placing handcuffs on Thabo, who kept his head down in shame. Ketumetse, still in her long white dress and veil, looked lost. She tried to hold back tears, but it was too late. Her dream wedding had turned into a public disaster. Guests watched in disbelief as even Zanele's aunt, the woman who had helped plan the fake wedding, was led out of the hall in handcuffs. No one could believe it. Just minutes ago, people were clapping and smiling. Now, they were filming and whispering. Phones were out. Videos were being recorded from every corner of the room. Within an hour, the clips had hit social media. One video showed the moment police interrupted the vows. Another clip showed Ketumetse being walked out by two female officers while still wearing her wedding dress. It was shocking, dramatic, and impossible to ignore. The story spread fast, first through WhatsApp and Facebook groups in Uganda, then across TikTok and Instagram in South Africa. The headlines were wild. Bride arrested at the altar. Real bride exposes fake wedding. Family fraud busted in viral wedding scandal. News channels picked up the story within hours. Talk shows began discussing it. People were furious, not just because of the betrayal, but because of the deep level of lies and disrespect. How could they do this to Zanele? Many asked online. Others couldn't believe someone would use another person's ID to get married. The fact that it was her own cousin and her own aunt made it worse. It was betrayal from her own blood. The anger grew stronger when screenshots of the wedding certificate surfaced, showing Zanele's full name and ID. While Ketumetse stood at the altar pretending to be her, everyone could see it clearly now. This wasn't just betrayal, it was a serious crime. People from all over the country began sending messages of support to Zanele. "You're so strong," many wrote. "You saved yourself with truth." Others shared their own stories of betrayal and thanked her for being brave enough to speak out. Women especially connected to her story, not just because of the heartbreak, but because she stayed calm, used the law, and showed the world that silence is not the answer. Instead of crashing the wedding with screams or revenge, she collected the truth, contacted the police, and let justice do the work. Thabo, once seen as a charming man, became the most hated name online. People couldn't believe he used Zanele's trust to commit fraud and tried to marry her cousin like nothing was wrong. Ketumetse's photos, taken from the wedding, now turned into arrest pictures, were shared with thousands of comments calling out her greed and betrayal. Even Zanele's aunt, who many once respected, lost her place in the community. She had helped her niece's identity be stolen and thought no one would notice. The fallout didn't stop with just public shame. The police announced official charges: identity theft, forgery, and attempted marriage fraud. These were not small crimes. Thabo and Ketumetse faced serious jail time. Zanele's aunt was also charged for helping with the illegal documents. Their names were now in the news for all the wrong reasons. No one could hide from it, and no one was coming to save them. They had destroyed their own lives with lies and greed. Meanwhile, Zanele stayed quiet. She didn't post videos. She didn't argue online. She simply watched as the truth reached everyone. People called her strong, wise, and brave. But Zanele didn't feel like a hero. She was still healing from the pain. But deep inside, she knew one thing. She had protected herself with courage. She didn't lose. They did. For days, people continued talking about the wedding scandal. Radio shows, morning news, social media, everywhere. The story spread like wildfire. It became more than just a gossip story. It became a lesson. People started discussing the dangers of silence, the importance of checking documents, and how love should never be used as a weapon. Zanele's story reminded people that speaking up, even when it's hard, is better than staying quiet while being destroyed from the inside. What started as a nightmare for Zanele turned into a powerful message for many. She had lost her wedding day, but she gained the world's respect. And as the ones who betrayed her were taken away, the real bride, the one who was left out, ignored and lied to, stood tall, not in a gown, not with a bouquet, but with the truth on her side. And that, more than any wedding, is something no one could take away. After everything she went through, Zanele did not hide. She didn't run away in shame. Instead, she stood up stronger than ever before. Her story had touched thousands of people across Uganda, South Africa, and even beyond. People saw her as a woman who refused to be broken, a woman who used her pain to protect her future. TV shows started calling her. News reporters wanted to hear directly from her, not just about the fake wedding, but about how she found the strength to act calmly, report the crime, and face her own family with courage. Zanele sat in interviews with grace. She didn't speak with hate or anger. She spoke with wisdom, warning others about the dangers of silence, of trusting blindly, and of not knowing your rights. Soon, Zanele's name was everywhere, but not as a victim, as a voice for women. People wanted to hear more, and Zanele had a bigger dream now. She wanted to help other women who were being lied to, used, or silenced. So, with help from local lawyers and supporters, she started a non-profit organization. Its mission was simple: teach women about their legal rights, help them speak up, and protect them from fraud, abuse, and betrayal. She called it She Knows, because she believed knowledge is the first step to freedom. The final scene of Zanele's journey is not a wedding. It is a launch event. She walks into a bright hall, wearing a beautiful red dress, holding her head high. The room is full, with friends, supporters, and women who were inspired by her. People clap as she takes the microphone. This time, she's not walking toward lies, but toward purpose. And this time, she is not alone. Everyone is invited. Everyone sees her not as the woman who was betrayed, but as the woman who rose, wiser, stronger, and ready to lead.